Oh great, a glow-in-the-dark ghoul. Here's your spooky spot in McFarlane Toys, Batman 66, the McFarlane Platinum Edition, Lord Deathman. Lord Deathman was a mysterious crime boss who could return from the dead. In one gruesome incident, he came back to life mid-autopsy. Lord Deathman also had superhuman strength and stamina, which he used to battle Batman, the Outsiders, and Talon. Ra's al Ghul even sought to siphon the regenerative fluids from Lord Deathman's body. So now Batman's going to have to deal with a dead guy, back in black and all decked out in green. Before we get a closer look at the Platinum Edition version of Lord Deathman, let me send out a big ghoulish thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample we could have a look at. Now, this is obviously just using the same mold as the earlier looked at Lord Deathman, and obviously I will be bringing that figure in more in a moment for comparisons. But for the figure's height, glow-in-the-dark Lord Deathman stands the same, 5 3/4 of an inch in height, or the figure's going to be about 15 centimeters tall. As for bringing in figures, we can bring in the original Lord Deathman, so you can see between the two they're sharing the exact same mold. One, though, is done in white, one, though, is done in green. The one in green does glow, so at least there's that. Other figures for comparison's sake, here's what the figure looks like with Robot Batman. Here's what the figure also looks like with Joker Man. And the figure that we started this recent wave with looking at, here's what he looks like with the 66 series Superman. If you could believe it, the molds aren't the only thing that gets shared between the two Lord Deathmans, as the figure also comes included with the exact same sword. Let me actually, in fact, back up just a little bit. It's not exactly the same sword. It's molded the same, but it's obviously cast in a different plastic. While the bottom one's been cast in a silver plastic, or possibly even a black plastic painted then in silver, the one to the top, though, has actually been cast here in a green plastic. I think what's probably been the case is they actually would have cast the blade plastic and then probably painted the guard and the hilt in the black. Either way, though, it's the exact same sword, and it holds in his hand the exact same way as well. He only has one means of holding it. It's only this hand right here, if I move my own hand out of the way. This closed fist isn't going to be any help to anybody, but if you did want to have him holding the sword, it easily fits into his hand, and with the afforded additional articulation both in the shoulder and also in the elbow, you can easily move his arm around. Same, though, can't be said, unfortunately, for the legs. The legs are always the one thing that's a little bit more limited when it comes to this line, but at least you can easily move his arms back and forth, and we'll get kind of more into the articulation on the figure in a moment. This does, though, glow in the dark, as well as all the things that are in green all glow on Lord Deathman. If you don't believe me, you should believe me. I'm going to bring in my black light here, and I'm just going to cast the light across the front of his face, all down his body, and even across the blade of the sword, so you can see that they do glow in the dark. If further proof is in the pudding, then what I'll also do in a moment is I'll cut the light so you guys can see how much more this guy does glow. It's a nice little added bonus to an already an awesome sculpt. I really did like the initial Lord Deathman, and I think like this one does things well too. If you prefer, though, the green motif, this one definitely does things a little bit better than the white. I will say, though, like, to compare the two, I kind of still prefer to have the original Lord Deathman more in white, just because it looks more like a skeleton. For some reason, looking at this also looks like Scareglow from the Master Universe line. One thing, obviously, with the carryover, this being the same figure, is that unfortunately there's no printing on the back of the figure's body. Flip the cape up on the original one, so you can see that they're identical from one to the other. I mean, even just to look at them by the way that the cape is brought over his shoulders, you would really be not able to even tell the fact that this one is the glow-in-the-dark version, this is the wall-white version, because the gloves and the belt are painted exactly the same. Flip, though, back the capes, you can see like the head sculpts are also similarly shared. The head sculpt, one thing, obviously, with this one, is that the detailing on this one seems a little bit more muted because, again, like he's got the glowing plastic, but the head sculpts are, though, identical. I did say, though, initially when we looked at this figure, if I can just fix the cape on this one, that the head sculpt was a little on the bigger side, especially when we compared it, say, for example, with Adam West Batman. Speaking of Adam West, I can't help but find a reason to bring back in the original figure that we also had a look at. One thing I did want to say May involve me having to first remove the blade. There we go. One thing I did want to say, though, is between the two, it looks like they are sharing the same bodies. This is still one thing I mentioned in the other review of Lord Deathman, so, I mean, obviously nothing does change there. It looks to be like the arms are the exact same. It looks probably like also from the shoulder and the bicep section, that's also the same. And it looks to be the case that the bicep and also the lower legs, short of, again, like the fact that they would have had to mold the boots differently and added the new gloves to Batman, it looks like they are using the same bodies. An interesting thing about it, though, is while you're even looking at like the trunk area, I mean, this has only just been painted on. In one way, I kind of wish they could have actually molded a belt to put that over top of the body, but instead, rather, they just painted it on there. Now, this Batman had a utility belt, but if you look at it, the utility belt is a separate piece. If you were to remove this, what you basically would be seeing underneath is what basically is given here to Lord Deathman. So, like, exactly the same bodies. Capes are a little bit different, obviously. The cape is a lot wider here on Lord Deathman. Unfortunately, though, I still had the same problem as before. Whatever figure it was it Joker Man? It might have even been Joker Man. The way they actually attach the capes inside the packaging, they put a little strip of tape right there. And if you're not careful, I tried to be really careful, but I guess the adhesive from the tape has now left the mark behind on the cape. So if you are getting any of these figures for yourself, just be careful of removing the cape. I feel really like they didn't even need to put the tape there in the first place. I get the main reason why they did is so the cape doesn't move around inside the packaging, but I mean, really, like, the clamshell is only, say, this wide. How much really moving around is the cape going to be anyways? If they didn't tape the cape, then I wouldn't have any issue. And I certainly wouldn't have this little mark left behind. Because, again, I was trying to be careful. I guess I wasn't careful enough. By the way, the figure does have pegos on the undersides of his feet, so that's exactly the same as the Lord Deathman from before. Maybe what I will do, though, is I'll cut the light so you guys can see how this guy does glow in the dark. Now, I'm not sure if you guys can actually even see this with now the lights cut out. I had this guy actually sitting in front of my office light just to absorb some of the light that the bulb was projecting outward. Unfortunately, though, while I am easily able to see it, you guys probably will have a little bit harder of a time. So again, I'll just bring back in my black light. I'll let that shine across the front of the head, and of course, all of the front of his chest as well, so you can see how well that does illuminate. If I move it away, you might be able to see enough of it. You probably can see a little bit more here in the arms on either side, and even also that works as well with the legs. Of course, the much longer the light is shining onto the plastic, the better the absorption of the light will be, and the easier the actual figure will glow in the dark. As for Lord Deathman's articulation, it'll be exactly the same as the one that we looked at before. So I said it's going to be on a ball joint. It does rotate all the way around. The way that the cape is actually designed is, even though it does have a higher collar, and the cape as well is clipped the exact same way as your Superpowers figures also from McFarlane's team, but because at least the neck is high enough, I don't have any real issues when it comes to rotating the head. In fact, actually, yeah, you can rotate it all the way around. You have the head looking up only by just a little bit, and it also looks down only just by a little bit. It's one of those cases, I'm sure if you blinked, you may have missed it. It doesn't really move up and down as much, but it does rotate back and forth fine. There's a little bit of head pivot, but not by much, though. The arms do hinge out a lot easier, though. They come out way beyond the point of 90 degrees. In fact, like, what would that be, like 120? 120 maybe? You can take the arms and rotate them all the way around. Now, the only thing about them is by adopting the same body as Adam West's body, you can see like the way that the shoulders are designed, they cut outward. They're sort of more like a triangular shape. So this, while it's not giving necessarily any issues when it comes to the arms hinging out this way, they will, though, wreak havoc when it comes to trying to rotate the arms all the way around. They're just going to be a little bit more that the arms are going to get hung up against. There is a hinge in the elbow that allows at least the arm to rotate also back and forth. You can take as well the hands and rotate them also all the way around. Lord Deathman's waist articulation is the fact it's just a straight swivel. And speaking of swivels, he only has just a swivel forward and back on the legs. No hinging outward on the thighs. Only a single hinge again on the knee, but allows at least the lower leg to rotate. And again, there's no toe articulation, no foot articulation on the figure at all. Well, again, still, this is just basically the same building and mold as essentially as the Adam West Batman, or just, again, free up space to bring back in the original Lord Deathman, or as the original one that we already had a look at. You know, there's something still to be said about the charm of having a glow-in-the-dark feature. Obviously, usually it means that the colors have to be distorted a little bit. So I'm glad that they decided to make it more green and not try to incorporate a glow-in-the-dark to the initial Lord Deathman, because I think what would end up happening is it would have distorted and almost yellowed the white areas of the figure. No, keep them separate. Keep them separate. So again, if you wanted just more of the basic black and white version of Lord Deathman, that option is available. But if you like the option of the glow-in-the-dark, the glow-in-the-dark incorporated paint does bring up a lot more color. It makes him a little bit more vibrant. And it certainly does make him a lot more like Scare Glow, too. And while he only still possesses the exact same accessories, now having a glow-in-the-dark sword, which I didn't end up showing you in this review, he's a nice-looking figure. He is, though, a Platinum Edition, though, so while maybe getting the Lord Deathman in the original black and white color scheme might be a little bit easier, you may have to work a little bit harder to track down the Platinum Edition if that's a figure you want to pick up for your collection. While there may have been some criminals in the Batman 60s series that were created solely for the show, most of the villains actually already had an origin long predating even the 60s series being around. Lord Deathman, though, you don't have to date as far back as the 60s, as his origin actually was from 2015, as he first appeared in Batman the 66 series issue number 21. I think he has also jumped over to the DC regular comic verse, but if you wanted to go back to his more campier roots, it's not, again, that far away. I mean, it's what, like 8 years ago that Lord Deathman first appeared. He's been wreaking havoc in Gotham ever since. Now, the neat thing about the glow-in-the-dark is obviously it does change the color of the figure. Instead of just being the black and white, now you got yourself black and green. And the green does look good with the figure. It does still, of course, utilize the same body as from before, so it's nothing necessarily getting changed this time around. It's kind of more cosmetic than anything else. It's just personal preference. Do you prefer your Lord Deathman to have the black and white, or you prefer your Lord Deathman to have black and green? Or if you're just an avid fan of the 60s stuff that McFarlane's been churning out as of late, why not get both? You can add both of them to your shelf. If you had, though, the choice between the two, the Lord Deathman that was the black and white, or the Lord Deathman that's now the glow-in-the-dark green, which would you choose if you only had the choice of one? Let me know down below in the comments section. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the glow-in-the-dark Platinum Edition Lord Deathman from the Batman 66 series that we could have a look at this review. Speaking of reviews, if you guys enjoyed the one you just finished watching, you don't need to scream. All you have to do is hit it with a like. But if you want to certainly stick around for more, make sure you hit that ghoulish subscribe button. I thought it was covered in slime, but looks like producer Tony's gone and cleaned it up. But yeah, if you want to hit that subscribe button down below, sure. If you want to turn on the bell notification, absolutely. And yeah, come back on a regular basis, because while we have wrapped up things right now for a glow-in-the-dark Lord Deathman, there's definitely going to be a lot more spooky reviews coming your way during the month of Spottober. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.